This is Brian from Bluegrass Exotics. Today we're going to talk about how to take your snake to the vet. I hope you never have to take your snake to the vet, but probably you're going to have to. Whether you've got one snake or whether you have 3 or 4 or whether you've got 100, at some point you're going to need to take a snake to a vet. Things come up. Perhaps you've ordered a snake in and it's shown up with some sort of problem. Perhaps you had a power outage and your temperature's dropped and an animal or two got a respiratory infection, your humidity's been off, maybe you feed live and there was an injury during the feeding process. There's a long list of reasons why you might want to take a snake to a vet. Maybe it's just a wellness check. But in either case, we're going to go over the tools and the things that you're going to need to get your snake to the vet safely and cover different scenarios such as what if it's particularly cold out, or it's winter, or it's dry, or it's hot, or it's rainy. We're going to talk about what kinds of things you're going to need and how to tackle those problems if and when they come up. So this is the container that I use to transport snakes to the vet. Any snake that'll even halfway comfortably fit in here, this is what they go in. This is a Critter Keeper or some sort of brand hamster enclosure that you can get from most of the big chain pet stores. So it does have the top that doesn't hold heat or humidity, but I use it anyway. A, I can get around that, and B, I don't want to take a snake in a plain Sterilite tub because I don't want to have the vet get the wrong impression as to how I care for my snakes. And this is not the time or the place for a rack versus tank versus vivarium discussion. I use racks here, I use tubs, not this particular one because it doesn't have any holes in it, but you can see behind me I've got tubs with holes in them. But I don't want that to, I don't want a negative impression of me as a keeper to translate to poor care of my snake. So I would rather show up to the vet with something that is obviously not the snake's enclosure and is evidently just for a travel case. So the very first thing I do is I line the thing with a couple sheets of paper towel. This is for a little bit of insulation on the bottom. It's also just in case the snake has an evacuation, either to or from. I want something to be able to soak it up. The next thing I do is I have a snake bag. For those of you that are curious, this is a Butter Woma. She is one of my favorites, and she looks big for this bag, but she is not, I promise. So I like to tie slip knots in the top of my bag, and every once in a while I will finish it up with a Erie knot, for anybody that knows what that is. And then I put the snake in gently. Super important. And almost anybody can figure this out, but here's what a lot of people miss. I'm going to take a thermometer and I'm going to put it in there with her so that when I get to the vet, I know what kind of temperatures she's been exposed to. The very first thing the vet's going to ask me is what kind of temperatures does she have normally, and I'll have that on my highs and lows here, both for humidity and for temperature. The other thing that this allows me to do is put this whole thing in my passenger seat and keep an eye on it while I'm driving. So if it's really cold out, I'm going to go ahead and go upstairs, I'm going to get my car started, I'm going to get my car warmed up, and then when I take this and put this in the car, I shouldn't notice much of a temperature drop or rise one way or the other. So right before I go outside, I'm going to take this towel, I'm going to put it over the enclosure like this, and I'm going to wrap the whole thing in a towel. And this towel is going to do a really good job of keeping out cold breeze. It's breathable. Now the snake is in a towel, an enclosure, and a bag, but there's still plenty of air. what I'm really trying to do is I'm trying to fight against cold breezes coming in. The other thing I'm trying to do, especially if it's winter, is I'm trying to fight against really, really hot breezes coming in from the vent from my car. So if you get in the car and it's winter wherever you live, and it's, we'll say 30 degrees, and you get your car nice and hot, and you crank the heat in your car, you put this on your passenger seat, you take the blowers and you put the blowers directly on the snake, this snake could get really, really hot. So what I try and do is, once I get the car hot, once I get the snake into the car, then I take the towel off. That way, on the trip, I can keep an eye on the temperature. I don't care so much about the humidity. There's not a lot I can do about the humidity on the way to and from the vet. If I really, really needed to keep some humidity up, I might take a sprayer and I might give the paper towels just a little spritz. Give me 1 second. Just to show you guys how little I mean. I don't mean a soaking. I mean a spritzing. A lot more than that, and I wouldn't feel good about it. The snake, even if your vet is an hour away, the snake is not going to spend any more than 3.5 hours outside of its proper enclosure anyway. The humidity is not going to be a big deal. But you do want to keep the temperatures within good range. So I definitely care about the temperatures. I make sure and wrap the enclosure with a towel to and from the car while it's in the car. I make sure the towel is off. I keep my eye on the temperature gauge while it's in the car so I know that the snake is not too hot and not too cold. If it's freezing, like super frigid, I might take one of these hand warmers, one of these heat packs. Now this is one of the cheap crappy ones you get at Walmart. This is not the good kind that you use for shipping. It's a Hot Hands hand warmer, 10-hour heat. This gets way too hot for your snake. So what I would do is I would take this and I would affix it to the outside of the enclosure somewhere. So the idea of this thing is I'm not trying to heat the snake, I'm trying to heat the plastic, right? So if the wind is blowing, towel or not, if the wind is blowing and cold temperatures of 5, 10, 15, 20 degrees are cooling this plastic down, that's going to also cool down the air inside the critter carrier. So what I'm trying to do is combat that process by trying to keep the plastic warm. So the warm plastic fights against the cold air. What I'm not trying to do is put this thing inside of here, put my snake on it, and then show up to the vet with a respiratory infection and a thermal burn on the belly. That's no good. So, keep this thing. First of all, you probably don't need one. Probably don't need one. If you are in the far north and it's winter, or if you are in the far north and it's just way cold and you're very worried about having your snake outside, use one of these. Use it on the outside. No, don't put it on the inside. The ones they use for shipping reptiles to you are different. They're a little more expensive. And you know what? If you feel like getting onto shipyourreptile.com and ordering 5 or 10 of the kind of the good grade or professional shipping grade versions of these to throw in with your snake, fine. I certainly won't tell you you won't, or I certainly won't tell you not to, but I will probably tell you that you probably don't need to. So, now, what we've got a paper towel on the bottom. We've got a thermometer in there with it that I can easily keep my eye on. We've got a snake that's in a bag. The bag is secure. I've got the top securely locked in place. I've got a towel to put over it to keep cold breezes out on the way to the car. Get to the car, take this off, keep my eye on the thermostat, make sure the air blowing from my vents is not too hot on the snake. Pull up to the vet, turn the car off, put the towel back on, wrap this thing up, and then remember to put the towel underneath the bottom of this thing. Because all vets look different, but a lot of times there are countertops or tables or benches or something, and you're going to want to set your snake down. You don't want a really cool tabletop to then fight against what you're trying to keep warm in here. So another good reason to wrap this thing up entirely is so your snake just feels good, right? So it's already in a bag, it already can't see out. Maybe you don't have a bag. Not everybody has a bag. If you don't have a bag, use a pillowcase. If you don't have a pillowcase, this is still going to help your snake feel secure. But this is twofold, because this also hides your snake from dogs and cats and birds and other things that might be in the vet's office when you get there. It also, at least for me, helps prevent a little bit of awkward conversation. So if I walk into the vet's office and there's 14 soccer moms and their Dalmatians or their standard poodles that they're having groomed, I can just hold this thing and then I don't have to answer a bunch of questions about, ooh, well, what is that? And even somebody might ask me, hey, what is that? And I just say, a snake, and I just leave it at that. For me, for my snake, for the other patrons in the vet's office, for the receptionist, it's just a good idea. Have your snake covered. So you get there, you get signed in, eventually you get called back to the vet's office. Then what do? Well, then you get back to the vet's office, and probably you should be the one to then unpack your snake. So that does two things. Number one, it shows the vet that you are a qualified keeper, that you understand all the pieces, parts, and components of keeping a snake secured. So secured, in fact. This Uri knot is the end of me. Alright. So the other thing that this allows the vet to do is to be a little more comfortable. Nobody really wants to stick their hand into a bag with a snake they don't know in it. This lets you, who knows your animal, go ahead and get the animal out safely and gently. You can give it to the vet, they can give it a good look over, they might want to put it back down in here. Probably the very first thing they're going to want to do is take a weight. Pro tip. Know the weight of your snake before you go to the vet. If you really want to look like you're really a good quality snake keeper, show up to the vet, let the vet weigh your snake, but as they're weighing your snake, say, oh, it's 642 grams, or whatever your snake happens to be. I think that really instills a lot of, it instills a sense of trust with your vet. If your vet knows that you're giving it the proper care, that you're keeping an eye on the snake's stats and health and well-being, that goes a long way, and they're going to treat you with a lot more respect, and they're going to treat your animal with a lot more respect too. So your snake is done at the vet. You might have some meds, you might not have some meds, who knows. What do? You do the whole thing in reverse. I'm going to take the snake, I'm going to pack it back up in the bag. Try and do this head first. You don't have to, but it really helps a lot if you put the snake in the bag head first. Alright, make sure that I'm not grabbing any tail. Got this thing back up. I see your little head wants to come out. Got enough room, throw a Uri knot in it. And it's secure. Close the top up, repeat process with the towel. Now, if you've been in the vet's office for a really long time, and it's really cold out, and you think your car might have cooled down, take your snake up to the receptionist, pay your bill, and then say, hey, do you mind if I leave this here while I go out and start my car? Probably they're not going to have any sort of problem with that at all. In an ideal world, the onus is on them to make sure that your snake is in good care for the 30 seconds while you're away, but in reality, it's still on you. So take the enclosure and put it way, 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 way back, far away from where any kind of jumping dogs or excited cats or anything might get to it. And you know what? If you want to be a little bit pushy, push it right next to the receptionist. Just have it just, as soon as the receptionist says, oh yeah, you can leave it there, just put it right up next to her. And, I mean, what's she going to do, right? So run out, start your car, sit there for a minute, make sure the car is warming up nicely, come back in, check on your snake, and after a few minutes, take this thing out, put it back in your car, and it's time to get this back off so you can keep an eye on the thermometer while you're on your way home. And that is how to have a safe and successful trip to the vet. Alright, this has been Brian from Bluegrass Exotics. We appreciate your support, we appreciate you watching the video, and if you have any questions, let us know down in the comments. Thank you.